The manicured grass, the head-to-toe whites, the crisp pock of ball on racket. It could only be Wimbledon. Except it isn't. In fact, it's early September 2022 and we're on the set of Amazon Prime Video's 15 Love at the Cumberland Lawn Tennis Club in London's Hampstead. You can't film at Wimbledon itself because when the championships have finished, as they do this weekend, they're too busy doing tours to stop for the cameras. So the Cumberland has doubled up for tennis's grass paradise, and today they're filming a training sequence with local pros as extras. The show's stars, Poldark's Aidan Turner and upcoming Irish actor Ella Lily Hyland, are doing shadow swings but not hitting anything. The balls are added later using CGI. As producers of football dramas have found, getting actors to look convincing as professional sports stars is harder than you'd think. We've tried hitting the balls and it's so difficult, Aidan says, so they do them in post-production. Or we get the pros to come in and put a wig on. The six-part series peers beneath the genteel surface of professional tennis to its dark underbelly. It may be partly set at the Wimbledon Championships, but it's a long way from the wholesome fantasy of the 2004 movie Wimbledon, in which fading star Paul Bettany is inspired by up-and-coming player Kirsten Dunst to a cheesy triumph, falling in love with her along the way. 15 Love follows Ella Lily's Justine Pierce, a teenage prodigy taken on by Aidan's coach Glenn Lapthorne and powered Raducanu like from a wild card entry to the semi-finals of the French Open. Everyone gets behind this new Brit talent, says writer Hania Elkington. And then she crashes out on court with a fractured wrist, retires from the tournament and eventually from tennis altogether. The series starts 5 years on from that. She's 22 and has gone into sports physiotherapy, but she's never really made peace with what happened to her. At this point Lapthorne comes back into her world when he takes a job at the Longwood Tennis Academy where Justine now works, leading her to report her old mentor to the police for what she now sees as sexual abuse and coercion. But it's no open and shut case. It's a real shock to her system, says Ella Lily. She was in love with him when he was her coach. There's a lot of history. She works primarily off instinct, so in relation to Glenn her feelings change constantly. It means that Justine is not always seen as a reliable witness. And so the he said she said grudge match begins, with things getting even thornier when Justine's best friend Renee, Harmony Rose Bremner, comes into Glenn's orbit. 15 Love inhabits a gray area you're unlikely to have heard about over the Wimbledon fortnight, yet in the tennis world the story is all too familiar. I've always been fascinated by the power dynamics within professional tennis players' setups, says Naomi Cavaday, a former British number 6 and now a commentator and tennis consultant on 15 Love. I spent more time with my coach than he did with his wife. I was hiring and firing 40-year-old men when I was 17. As teenage girls we're driven to find somebody who'll take control of our career, which is your life when you're an athlete. On the women's side, there's a lot less collaboration between players and coaches. It's more dictatorial than on the men's side, but the player can still fire the coach over breakfast if they feel like it, which means that although coaches are powerful, they're also incredibly insecure. I think a lot of the barriers that are crossed are about coaches searching for security, says Naomi. It becomes much harder to fire someone if you're very, very good friends with them than if you have just a purely professional relationship. Occasionally these stories burst into the open. In April last year Pam Shriver, winner of 22 Grand Slams, said she had endured an inappropriate and damaging relationship with her former coach Don Candy during her playing career, saying it started when she was 17 and Candy was 50. And on the day I watched 15 Love being filmed, Pierre Bouter, the former coach of French tennis player Fiona Ferro, was charged with raping and sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. His lawyer said he recognizes the relationship occurred but denies any coercion. It was a love story according to him. The attitude is that it's about getting them to perform, says Naomi. It's wrong. People say things like, the best way to get players to perform is to make them happy because they're infatuated with their coach and the attention they're getting. In the UK the law changed last year so that children under 18 are now protected from sports coaches in the same way that they are from teachers. But Glenn and Justine's relationship takes place prior to this, when, as long as the child was over 16, the coach wasn't deemed to be abusing their position if they engaged in a sexual relationship. So whatever Glenn Lapthorne may or may not have done, it wasn't against the law. It's complicated, says Aidan. It would have been easy to just blanket Glenn as a villainous or malevolent character, but it wouldn't have felt truthful. I think he's a really good coach and mentor. But there are abuses of power going on. Beneath the moral ambiguity, this is a tennis story, and to tell a tennis story you need tennis. Ella Lily is a former Ireland athletics champion and Aidan used to play badminton, but the tennis scenes still weren't easy. There was no way they were going to be able to actually play, says Naomi. Not in the 3 months we had. But the hardest thing about your relationship to the ball is the receiving skills rather than the sending skills. So we got rid of the receiving skills with CGI. There's no ball to receive, you've just got to look good to solve it. Ella Lily says it was more like choreography than sport as Naomi coached the actors on the movements that mark professional players out. That's why you won't see them serve. The throwing motion of the serve takes years, Naomi says. It's an incredibly difficult movement and it's a massive giveaway that you're an amateur if you can't do it. You will see them hold the racket by the throat in between points though. Tennis players get sweaty hands. They don't want to keep them on the grip unnecessarily, says Naomi. Venus Williams is the only exception. As with all good tennis drama, there is a racket smash scene. A friend of mine who I booked for the actors to play against had to smash a racket on her bag, says Naomi. We put bricks in the bag, and we had to make cuts in the racket to get it to crumble in the right way. She spent 4 hours smashing rackets. She had a whale of a time. Another problem was finding courts to play on. The famous red clay of the Roland Garros Stadium in Paris, home of the French Open, was recreated in Edinburgh, with bags of clay shipped up from the National Tennis Centre in southwest London, the only place in Britain that has the same clay. The fictional Longwood Academy was set at the Tring Park School of Performing Arts, where they laid 7 grass courts for filming. The upshot of all this effort is that the tennis is a believable backdrop to a sticky morality play. It turns out to be ample territory for things to happen that shouldn't happen, says Aidan Turner.